early on, Carl DuPont had talked about earthworm numbers dwindling and shared a site for threatening soil health, and restoring soil health takes time. Jonathan, as you've shared about, you're talking about a soil that's really healthy and vibrant, can have 500,000 worms per acre. Is it a good practice to try to bring worms, earthworms, night crawlers into the field to try to build up those numbers, or do you think it naturally happens as you provide the food source for them?
I think what happens is that as you provide the habitat, if you build it, they will come. It's that simple. And they come fairly rapidly. I know that under certain circumstances, rebuilding soil can take a long time. But when you're doing things, using some central principles, you can actually regenerate organic matter at a pretty staggering rate, as well as biological diversity and function within your system.
Okay, well, great. I have another question from Mark Goodson. He had talked about how does synthetic nitrogen sources affect biological activity and carbon sequestration?
Yeah, synthetic fertilizers, particularly ammonium-based fertilizers, can have a kind of an immediate kill zone when they're applied, but it's fairly short-lived. The key thing is when you're applying inorganic fertilizers is you need the carbon to go along with it. So if we're not applying residue carbon to our systems and we're over applying mineral nitrogen, it gets very leaky. So that's where the organic sources of nitrogen come into play, because you're adding both the high carbon-based materials plus the nitrogen, so you have a better chance of storing some of that carbon into soil humus forms.
Okay, well, great. Well, thanks. Next is a question from Amber Mace. Are there distinct biological benefits from certain manure sources? In other words, is there differences among cattle, poultry, swine, those types of manures on how they help improve the soil and a biological component?
I can address that a little bit, but I'm not a manure expert, but in terms of compositions of manure, the community that you're adding with the manure is going to interact with the existing soil community over which you're applying that manure. So the long-term effects, we're not too sure of how that community might get influenced over time by adding different sources of manure. But we do know that it will shift the communities over time, but it's more in response to how we've shifted the habitat of those microorganisms by adding different types of manures.
Okay. Thank you, Ray. Jonathan, were you going to add something?
Yeah, definitely different species of manure end up attracting different, different communities that specialize on those manures. So that ends up really influencing the species that you see on your farm. So, yeah.
Okay, then I have a question from Rick Kelch. Are there certain fields or soils that are more beneficial to receive manure applications?
I would say that if you have more coarser textured soils, lower organic matter soils, or soils that have been maybe overworked, adding solid-based manures over time would definitely probably improve things. The key thing is not to over-apply, because in those coarser textured, lower organic matter soils, you have less ability to retain some of the nutrients, so you could be losing them through leaching losses or to the atmosphere. So it's kind of a balance there on how much to apply based on the type of soil that you have and how much it needs ameliorating.
I think another really important point is that, simply spreading manure is not the same as having animals within your cropland. And I think that animals within your cropland have myriad benefits beyond just the production of manure. And really that should, in the successful farmers that I've seen that are eliminating a lot of their input costs and growing with biodiversity, they're one of the central principles that they're applying is it's integrating that animal back into the system.
Okay, great. I think the last question I'm seeing on our chat was one from Amy Schmidt, who's on the Manure Management team here in Nebraska. And I think she had indicated to Michelle, when you indicate that fall injection is a good strategy for preventing ARB and ARG export, how is export being defined in terms of runoff losses, movement through the soil, degradation? And I think Michelle may have responded back, but would you like to add some more to that, Michelle?
Yeah, sure. So we have been looking at the export of antibiotic resistance into tile drainage lines. So these have been primarily 1 acre field plots that receive a late fall manure injection. Usually the application is around Halloween, maybe into the first week or 2 of November. And what we do is we collect soil samples immediately after manure application, and then we go back the following spring and collect soil samples again, and then we monitor the water quality throughout the summer. And so in 2 of 3 years, so 2011 through 2013, in 2 of those years we did not see a statistically significant increase in antibiotic resistant bacteria or genes in that drainage. We did in 1 year in 2013. So Amy had also posted a follow-up question about the manure application history, and our control plots had not received manure for 30 to 40 years. So we did have a really nice a control system that had not received manure in many years. But what, again, kind of as I said in the talk, we did detect resistance in both the manure amended and the control plots. So it's important to understand that there are some baseline levels of resistance, even in systems that have a very long history of no manure application.
We do appreciate all the presentations this morning. Special thanks to Ray and Michelle and Jonathan, and for those that have been on.